So yeah, I work for the company called C&H Industrial. We've got many strings to our bow. If I move to the next one, quite simply, we make the big boys' toys and girls' toys, of course. But so we make everything from a small tractor like Kit has at about 14 horsepower is the smallest thing we make, and the biggest thing is over 1,000 horsepower. And lots of things in between. We're in construction and agriculture activities, going to focus on obviously the agricultural stuff today. And luckily, I haven't contradicted Kit too much. I've gone slightly back in time, slightly further in sort of what's agriculture all about, who cares anyway. As Kit said, go back a long time, that's what we all did. Everybody did agriculture. It's what we did to live. It's the only thing we did to live. And then as you move through the ages, things get more developed and people will realise agriculture is not a fun place to be, can't make any money. I'd argue over the fun place. I think it is quite a fun place to be. Probably still don't make any money, but anyway. So we today, not many people are involved. In developed worlds like the UK, like America, less than 1% of the population is involved in agriculture. So we're a small community. But really, it's enabler. It's enabled the world to be what it is today. Sort of everyone's happy when they're fed. If you haven't got food, everything else pales into insignificance. But if you've got food, then you can go and do something else. Looking to the future, what happens next? And again, luckily I haven't contradicted Kit too much in that there's a number of key items. We think obviously the population's growing, which is known, understood. It's going to add another couple of billion by 2050 is the forecast, which is on its own a problem. And then the other problem is the average calorie intake is also going up. So people want even more food for more people in the marketplace. Urbanisation, forget about COVID, before COVID anyway, everyone didn't want to live in the country, they want to live in cities where urbanisation, they want to live where the action is. Country's pretty boring. Obviously, COVID kind of rebalanced that a little bit, but I'm sure the trend is still going that direction. Touching a little bit, really, again, Kit said, food scarcity, growing yield demand, lots of reasons. We've done farming great over the last number of years, but perhaps some of the practices haven't been as good and clean as they could be. And then finally, climate change. We all know about it, it's all there. As the agricultural industry on a worldwide basis, we seem to be getting the sort of ticket of around about 18% contribution to the climate change problem. It's from the whole scheme of things, but 18% around the world seems to be the recognised number. If we come back to Europe, which is sort of where we live, obviously Brexit away, but let's assume we're in Europe, sort of 10% of sort of the emissions from pure agriculture activities is around about 10%. And then from the fuel side, it's 1%. So as a machinery manufacturer, we could actually sit there and say, well, we've only got 1% of the problem, not our problem. That's not quite the way we work. And we recognise we're here to help farmers improve their business, improve what they do as a job, and that can spread far wider than just providing them with a lump of metal. When it comes to emissions, again, there's two ways of looking at emissions. And some people choose whichever one suits them. At C&H, we believe it's really important to look at the whole impact. So it's the technical, the well-to-wheel scenario, not just the tank-to-wheel, which is on our machine. So we're trying to take some responsibility of what happens in the whole food chain through the system. That having said, there are some situations where tank-to-wheel is important, probably more in construction equipment than ag, but it still applies. Places where tailpipe emissions are important, then you can balance the story a little bit. One of the things as a big company, we recognise we need to create value for our customers. Whatever we do, we've got to create some value. Now that could be any number of these. It can be user experience. It can be new use cases. Providing new use cases makes this business more profitable. Sustainability, obviously very core at this moment in time, and it should be. Financial returns are obvious, and then regulation. What does that mean? Regulation means if there's a regulation that says the customer can't use something, then the rest of it is immaterial. So we've got to fit the regulations. Some of the regulations may not actually be perfect for what we're trying to achieve, but that's another discussion. From a C&H point of view, we have two main roadmaps we're looking at. One is zero emissions, and the other one is full automation. Now, these are not mutually exclusive. They cross lines, and I'll sort of just talk a little bit about that as we go through. From an emissions or energy point of view, our key thing is energy density in our machines. It doesn't matter how big the machine is, it's how do you get enough energy on that size of unit to last the period of time you want. So we've got this graph. You can see many of these in various formats, but really where you've got small machines, low energy, we generally believe batteries are a good solution. May not fit every application, but generally they're a good solution because that's where the customer uses it. Then we kind of have a notional medium size, and at that point, we are chasing compressed methane because we, as we'll see from Chris's bit, we think it's a real good solution on the whole ecosystem, but we also see some hybrid electric vehicles will come in, so in there, and at the big end, it's got to be a liquid fuel of some shape, we believe, but also e-functions. We don't believe we can power the whole unit with a battery, but there's lots of functions on the unit that we could do. At C&H, we've been looking at this business for quite a long time. We started in 2006 with a clean energy strategy, and that was, sorry, I was just looking. That was really introducing biodiesel across our whole range. It was 100% biodiesel, and it was a good demand from many countries that were supporting a biodiesel future. We've played with hydrogen concept vehicles. We had a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle back in 2009. We did actually build another one in 2011. And it's interesting. We put it on the shelf. It's not there at the moment, and it wasn't there in 2009. And our belief is it's still not ripe for our business at this moment in time. So we followed a bit of a methane path that was driven a lot by our customers, and also electrification on the other side of the panel. In electrification, we've launched a couple of tractors, not quite as small as kits, but there's the one at the top we've just launched this year. It's about 100 kilowatts unit. It's a full electric tractor. It's got automation on it. It can have a driver, doesn't need a driver. Other parts, we've got electrical construction equipment. The excavator there is launched today, and the I'll call it a JCB because my boss is not here, but the JCB type machine will be as electric machine. It will be launched next year. And then, as Kit rightly says, we're looking at robots. We're looking at drones. These are all electrical things that do seem to work. In the bigger side of things, under the line, is big machines, and there we see electrification, electric functions coming in more than electrifying the whole machine. Benefits obviously you get from electrification, if it's pure electric, is operating costs can be substantially lower, and noise reductions and zero emissions. So lots of nice benefits that add to the customer's experience, and hopefully that adds to his bottom line. From a point of electrifying machines, there's lots of areas. We have internal combustion on the engine on most machines today, and then we have hydraulic pumps and hydraulic valves and implements and other parts. Lots of these bits can be electrified. That doesn't mean to say we just electrify everything, because that maybe doesn't make sense. Some parts are really quite efficient on the machine already, and it's best to leave them as they are. Other parts, yes, there's options for electrification that says it makes sense to do. And then the other bit, as I say, we've gone down a methane path. We've done a compressed methane tractors. We've now got two. We've got a T6, which is about 180 horsepower or 132 kilowatts, depending on what language you want to worry. And now we're just launching a gas one at 200 kilowatts, 270 horsepower. That at the moment is CNG, but we are working on an LNG version as well going forward. And then telematics, touching again with something that Kit said. Telematics has a big part to play in the farm now. A few years ago, it wasn't really there. Now it's becoming second nature. There's lots of things that will tell the farmer about what he's doing. It's indicated on crop yields and other parts you can do. but it's even on alternative fuels. If we know where our tractors are, we know how much fuel they are, is in them, we can also link them with the fuel supply system, and the fuel infrastructure in our business is going to be a challenge. It's not get away from it. So if we can start predicting when the customer needs fuel, then we can start giving them ideas of where to get it from. Obviously, in electric cars, they do it today, so why can't we do it in our business as well? Just a couple of challenges on us for vehicles. Trying to put alternative fuels on tractors or on any vehicle, I've got a tractor here, but it's almost any vehicle, is a challenge. This is our 200 kilowatt tractor. That's the fuel tank. It's kind of made of plastic and it fits in all the spaces that we couldn't fit anything else in. If we do methane, we've got a package. If it's compressed or liquid, it's a challenge, but we believe it's doable. Batteries are a real challenge. If we use today's technology to last the same length of period as a tractor runs with diesel, the battery would be about 12 tons, and don't even ask how much it's going to cost you. And then hydrogen, again, you've got a package that's about the size of the tractor, just a package of hydrogen on the vehicle. The other problem we've got in our business is the fuel comes to the vehicle doesn't go to the fuel. And that's a real challenge. So it's the fuel infrastructure. It's a little bit like food miles. It's the last mile challenge. It's getting the fuel to the farmyard is one thing, but you then got to get it to the field, because bottom picture, there's 8 combines in that field. You can't expect those combines all to nip down the road to Tesco's every few hours to fill up. There's a number of ways being proposed to get over this. This is an electrification scenario. You can bring a generator of some shape or form or a battery to the site, and you can recharge in that sort of manner. But a lot of this thing is all going to be driven really by economics and the availability of the actual technology. We can make a pretty picture like this, but that's about it. In the ag side, there's lots of ways. This is not a CNH system, but it's something what one of our customers has done in Italy, and you can use solar panels to make locally produced energy on your farm. But whatever you do, we believe that sort of no technology is going to be sustained if we don't address a customer need. We need to demonstrate clear financial benefits or benefits to the customer, which would include in financials. And so we actually believe that energy supply solutions that are integrated into the business make the most sense. And on that, I'm going to pass to Chris, who will explain one of our solutions.
What I'm hopefully going to show you today is that we believe very shortly we're going to be demonstrating the world's first negative carbon footprint dairy farm. And I'd like to say that we've been working very closely with IFEA. Penny's in the audience today. I'm not going to have time to go through the numbers and where they come from. There's an IFEA meeting next week at Basildon. I can assure you that we've gone to extreme lengths to try and get as much evidence as possible to show that this is possible, because obviously it's a big statement to make. So towards a negative carbon dairy. What is it we're basing this on? Is basically fugitive methane. So Bennamann, it's really important to understand, we don't make biomethane, we don't make methane, we harvest fugitive methane. This is a 20-year-old slurry lagoon in Cornwall in February doing that. Okay, so you're looking at kilos of methane going into the atmosphere as we watch. So how do we capture that? Because methane, as we've just seen, could be an excellent fuel, especially if it's already on the farm. So our farm fueling issue goes away. I should say we now understand why that's doing that. Huge boils of gas, not little bubbles coming up in a cold environment, and I'll explain why. So at the moment, a lot of the literature states that the dominant source of fugitive methane from livestock is enteric, i.e. from burps and from the animal itself. And what we've now shown, and in fact the IPC have known for a long time, is actually there's between 2 to 4 times more methane coming from manure and slurry handling than there is from the enteric side of the animal. So I've put some numbers, I've just highlighted them in red. So if you go for the IPCC AL5 calculation, you get somewhere between 204 and 413 kilograms of fugitive methane per cow from slurry. That was revised, so somewhere on average around about 300 kilograms. That was revised to be around about 380 kilograms if in AR6, I believe. And we've done one of our own customers has calculated the farm and come up with a number of around about 300. So it's around 300 kilograms. To put that in perspective, currently the inventory for the UK, Ireland, France, Germany, and Holland says that's 10 kilograms. So we're between 20 and 40 times more amounts of methane coming from manure management than is in our current inventories. We've had our own biolab. We've set up experiments, been running now for 2.5 years, as you see. We've taken raw slurry, put it into 38 degrees C baths, 16 degrees C baths, stirred, unstirred, to try and recreate it. Our laboratory testing comes up with 346 kilograms. So again, in that 200 to 400 kilogram window. This is what happens in slurry lagoons. This is real data. After 560 days, the two bottom lines are running at 16 or ambient temperature. The top two lines are running at 38 degrees C, as you would in an anaerobic digester. Scarily, if you look at the anaerobic digester 50 days in, I don't know if there's a laser on this. Yeah. 50 days in here, an anaerobic digester has actually only taken about 40% of the biogas potential from the feedstock. Interestingly, here is still going after 560 days, and I'll quickly show you the next graph. This is now actually after 2.5 years, the same experiments. If we look at the top here, still producing biogas. This is the seasonal variation, so we see a little dip in the winter, but it's always going up. So we now know why these lagoons produce so much methane. And the seasonal variation is very little. If we do the energy balance for cows, another way of doing it, then actually from a paper, Johnson & Johnson in, I think it was 1994, somewhere in a graph they quote the ratio of enteric emissions, i.e. burps, to that from slurry manure. It's 8:1, so 90 kilograms from enteric, which is a pretty well accepted number, but only 11 kilograms of slurry manure. So the total fugitive emissions from a cow, this is per cow per year, in case you're wondering, is around 100 kilograms. Actually, when you then do this energy balance and all the data is actually 0.9 to 2.9, so it's 1 to 3. So it's actually 24 to 30 times wrong. That means, unfortunately, the total fugitive emissions for a cow is around about 360 kilograms and not 100, which sounds like an absolute nightmare because suddenly livestock has become that much more challenging to meet the climate requirements from the greenhouse gas. As I said, lots of people are still publishing this 10 kilogram number. This is a report from McKinsey, well recommended to read. But in here, they've got enteric fermentation running at 3.2 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. Manure management is 0.5. This was published as recently as, I think, July this year. So what do we do if we correct it? I must say this is only done graphically. So up until now, largely this is because no one's actually been able to measure it. Well, I'm pleased to say that in 2022, the California state government commissioned real measurements of hundreds of farms using state-of-the-art equipment, and they come out with, lo and behold, 144 kilograms for enteric and 332 measured data from farms from a distance. So it's beyond doubt that this is true. And this has been one of the issues that we've been facing, is that people have been saying, well, how can you possibly get a negative carbon footprint farm when the total amount of emissions from the cow is bordering on 500 kilograms of methane per cow per year? I should say this is enteric. It's a larger number than we might see in the UK because it's a bigger cow. All of these numbers have seasonal variations, and Andy Atkins and Neil Ward will be giving a great talk next week at Basildon explaining how these emissions factors can be manipulated and shown to be very low or very high. But each farm. So let's correct that graph from McKinsey the way we now know it to be true. Unfortunately, we've gone from 0.5 to 6.2 gigatons of CO2 equivalent, but now we're roughly twice as much as what McKinsey was saying earlier in the year. When we put them side by side, we can see that this is actually now by far the biggest contribution to climate change. Is the amount of fugitive methane coming off slurry stores and manure. This is a really interesting graph, and we might talk about this later. This, if we look at for animal protein livestock, these are all the best mitigations within this study. So the McKinsey highlights 28 mitigations. One is land management, so looking after the land. If it's below zero, it means it doesn't cost you anything, it makes you money. If it's above the line, it means it costs you money. And the width of the bar, so we're looking at the things in black, the width of the bar are the best mitigations that we can do if we're going to try and reach 1.5 degrees C. And we can see that actually 22, which is enteric fermentation, is animal feeds. So there's a bit of cost to it. It's not too high, but actually you get this really large benefit. 7 is hydrogen tractors on farm, just out of interest. 28 is anaerobic digestion of manures and slurry on farm. Massive cost, $1,000 per equivalent reduction in climate change. Very narrow benefit, so it's actually the lowest mitigation of the 28. If we now correct that for the numbers that we now know, it looks like that. So mitigation 28 goes from by far the smallest benefit to by far the largest benefit. Oh, and by the way, it's a fuel, so we make money. And yet it doesn't include the CO2 capture and storage from the additional abatement. So don't forget, with every kilo of methane, there's also 2.5 kilos of CO2. When we look at them side by side, if you're a policymaker and you had to choose which ones you're going to focus your R&D on, I think you'd probably choose that one, and not animal feeds. So how do we get to the path of zero carbon farming? Well, I haven't got time to go through the numbers entirely, but this is China Farm. And we have now got solutions that we're building for all different types of slurry manure stores. This is Trinance, and the numbers you'll see are based on Trinance now. So this is the first farm that Bennamann did, owned by Kevin and Katie Hall. Katie won Women in Ag for Europe this year at Agritechnica. So this is true proof. Their carbon footprint in 2021 was 734 tonnes. Just by capturing the methane, we reduced it to 87 tonnes equivalent. Next year, and that was not using the fuel for the tractor or the carbon footprint. We believe once we use the fuel for the tractor, as well as the fuel to power the farm, which we're already starting to do, then that will reduce to minus 60 tonnes of carbon by next year. So in conclusion, the quantity of fugitive methane is currently being underreported by a factor of 3 to 4. But this fuel provides the necessary ROI for the global adoption of methane as a fuel on farm. And if we can capture and utilise that fuel, then basically we take that farm from being an overall massive positive issue for climate change to a negative carbon solution. We also reduce the farm's need for fertiliser, which again is a massive part of its carbon footprint. And then this makes the farm, renders it a very powerful carbon sequestration instrument. So basically anything that we can also put into the soil is a real benefit. So we believe now that the dairy sector, and I suspect probably pigs and chickens as well, can be a significant contribution to the solution to climate change rather than the problem.